I study social movements, progressive movements in the Midwest after 1967. The quest for democracy, Black Power, New Left, and progressive politics in the post-industrial Midwest analyzes several progressive campaigns around urban development, policing, economic justice, and Jesse Jackson's 1988 presidential campaign as the national culmination of this politics. Various Midwestern cities and states, so Ohio, Chicago, Detroit. I was thinking, well, I wondered how organizers in Ohio, in the Midwest, like in other Midwestern locations, responded to deindustrialization. And I started with analyzing the responses to industrial plant closures, and then sort of moved out to incorporate responses to the 1967 Detroit urban uprising, the police shootings of African Americans in Detroit in the early 1970s, but then also the end of the anti-war movement in Ohio and in Detroit during the early to mid 1970s. Organizers in Detroit and in Ohio could create campaigns and raise awareness around issues pertaining to deindustrialization. They could even influence conversations about it, but they weren't as successful with like getting laws passed that would help curb plant closure, especially in Ohio, where the Ohio Public Interest Campaign tried to mount a campaign to pass a law called the Community Readjustment Act, which would require corporations that left to give workers more advance notice of a closure, pay severance, and that would be wages and benefits. But then also to contribute to a community fund, so communities could have resources in order to reinvest in itself. They weren't as successful, and part of that was because they also faced a coalition of Democrats, Republicans, and business leaders who believed that such a law would create undue harm for the market, the economic market. But then these sorts of conversations continue to persist. When the federal government, like U.S. Congress, passes a national plant closure law in 1988 called the Worker Adjustment Retraining Notification Act, and this law was much more watered down, but it forced corporations of a particular size or businesses of a particular size to give advance notice. And then in the financial crisis, the most recent one in 2007, between 2007 and 2009, where you had these big financial corporations failing, like Bear Stearns, you had employees and workers who wanted to try to use the Warren Act to sue for severance, right? I mean, so like there were these reverberations, like Mary Frances Berry calls the sort of failure, but then the persistent influence as reverberations of failure, and that was present, for activists who were organizing around economic justice. I want readers who encounter my work to, get an understanding of the importance of organizing, but whether it's successful in that particular moment or whether it fails in that particular moment, and to provoke people to try to make links between the successes and failures of past movements in popular mobilizations today.